I'm going to ask you all a question that I think I've asked over the last 7 years. I don't know how many times, hundreds of times. I asked it when we first brought Jacob's Law out to the floor of the New York State Senate. And we did that 2 times when we were in the majority to pass Jacob's Law. And I asked everybody on the floor, as I do in many events when I talk about Jacob's Bill, Jacob's Law, who as a parent or who has a child would not want to know if their child was being bullied in school? And I ask anybody in ear range who could hear my voice, and anybody here, raise your hand if you wouldn't want to know if your child has been bullied in school. Nobody ever raises their hand. When I asked that on the floor of the Senate the 2 times this passed, nobody raised their hand, and the bill passed twice overwhelmingly. Thank you. Hope that stays there. Hope it's sliding. Today, after we have this press conference, we're going to go to the Assembly chambers, and our session starts at 11. If it's legislative time, it could be 11:15, 11:30, 11:45. But our representatives here who have faced this issue will be there. And we'll be bringing out to the floor this resolution, which I wrote and sponsored and was supported in a bipartisan nature. And we're bringing this out to the floor for a discussion. And what the resolution is to declare October, that month, Bullying Prevention Month in New York State. I can't think of a better time to have the individuals who face this massive injustice and this tragedy to be here today at this press conference to support a piece of legislation called Jacob's Law, which will do exactly what this resolution calls for. Will help to prevent and mitigate the tragedy of bullying and how it can impact our young people and anybody in our particular community. Before I go any further in talking about the law, I just want to introduce to you the individuals who are here. And I'm so proud that this is a bipartisan piece of legislation in the Senate and the Assembly. It's being sponsored in the New York State Assembly by Assemblywoman Mary Beth Walsh, who's here with us. It's being sponsored with my colleagues in the New York State Senate by Senator Robert Jackson, which I'm proud to have with me, and Senator Louis Sepulveda, who is also on the other side of the aisle, but understands the importance of parents involved in their education. Also, another sponsor with several of my other colleagues is Senator Walczak, who is here with us. And the very important people who have experienced this tragedy and are turning it into something very positive is Christina and Richard Terrace, the parents of Jacob in the corner. And next to me, Isabella Sementill, anti-bullying advocate, with her parent, Paula Sementill. And we're so proud to have you here telling your story. And she's going to tell a story about how one act, it happens over and over for many children, day in and day out, but one act can possibly destroy the life of an individual and a family. But I like what she has to say. We all should be, and she is a tough cookie who doesn't crumble. And she turned her tragedy into something very special. Now, you may have heard over the last couple days, the Surgeon General at the federal level has come out and spoken about a developing and expanding epidemic in this state and across this nation. Do you know what he talks about when he talks about what the epidemic is? It's loneliness and it's isolation. I can't think of another group, perhaps our seniors in many ways, but another group who is very lonely, I know, and isolates themselves because of this tragedy in many ways, are those children who are being bullied. And, you know, I like to say, tongue-in-cheek, I had a real job at one time. I was an educator for 10 years. Taught kids with learning disabilities, ran a resource room, got my degree, special education from the College of St. Rose. And I could tell in a classroom, sometimes it was just a family issue, sometimes they weren't getting their nutrition, but many instances they were looking over their shoulder because they were being bullied. We spend billions of dollars to provide kids in New York State with a great education. They shouldn't be distracted from it. But most importantly, they shouldn't be impacted psychologically, emotionally, mentally, or physically by bullying that takes place and takes away from their ability to concentrate. I could see that in some of my students. And in many instances, we had to deal with bullying. Now, when you think about bullying, you think about your lives, and I think about my life. Some things have stayed the same, but some things have changed drastically. It's been there before, it's there now, probably be there in the future. What has stayed the same, and I remember this from my own experiences, not overwhelmingly, but things happen, is that young people are embarrassed when they're bullied. They don't want to go home and tell their parents what is happening. And that can turn into a tragedy. That's why it is so important to let the parents know when their child is being impacted like this. The second thing which has changed with bullying, it's a whole different world out there than we experienced it when I was there. Many of you were younger. But when we were bullied at school, if we got past the doors and the gates of the school and we got into our house, there was some reprieve. There is no reprieve now. Social media is 24/7. And it's psychological, it's emotional, it's getting on those sites and continuing it. Then it's coming to school and continuing it, and it can wear you down. And it can impact you in a whole variety of ways. Now, we passed a bill, Dignity for All Students Act. A good bill. You know what the bill does. It mandates, it requires, if a bullying incident takes place in our school and rises to an important occasion of how it took place, it has to be reported to the state education department. Unbelievably, it does not have to be, it is not required to be, it is not mandated to be reported to the parents of the child who's being bullied or the child who's doing the bullying. And let me make something clear. When I talked about that isolation, that loneliness, I think those kids who are doing that bullying are facing some of the same things. They have a real problem, and their parents are going to be notified by this law, as well as the parents of the child who's being bullied. Because I don't think there's a parent, and I could ask you to raise your hand again, who thinks that it's good for their child to be cruel, to be bullying, and to grow up with a situation and think that's our right to do. So on both sides, this reporting issue requirement says, to the parents of the child who's being bullied, report. To the parents of the child who is doing the bullying, they need to be dealing with this also. And there has to be mitigation. Now let's think about this. You've probably heard this over and over and over again like I have. We want the parents to be involved with their education. Join the PTA. Have parents-teachers meeting. Help us with the individual education plans. Volunteer. Raise money. Be a part of it. But yet, it's unconscionable when their child's head is being slammed into a school locker, a girl or a boy, they may not be notified. In many instances, they're not. And it can take a serious toll. And it has taken a serious toll. And Christine and Richard are here to tell you about their toll. Because they were not notified about the extent and the level of bullying that was taking place. And I think with Jacob, there was loneliness, there was isolation. And the sad part, a beautiful boy, as you see right there, took his own life. And I can tell you that they believe, and I believe, if they were notified, he very well would be alive today. So this is a personal issue to me as a fellow educator, someone who was in a classroom. We've passed it twice. There's no reason not to pass it again. And before I bring my colleagues up to say a few words, I think we really have to hear from those who've been victimized by this concern, this problem, so we get a complete understanding of what this is not a political thing. It shouldn't be a partisan thing. When it can pass with Democrats and Republicans twice in the Senate, I think we have to do everything we can to let parents be a part of the mitigation of this concern and this particular problem.